Hey you guys, what is going on? It's your boy Creative, and today with the huge release of Last Epoch, I'm going to show you the best Sentinel Paladin leveling build there is in the entire game. Last Epoch obviously has a ton of class variety, but I'm going to show you why this Sentinel Paladin build gives you not only the best damage in the game, but almost makes you invulnerable and invincible. You're extremely difficult to kill. Watch this video to the end and I'm going to show you everything this build entails and make it super simple for you. The first thing we're going to do is look at the passives for the Sentinel first and go through all of these skills and everything. And although I'm higher level, I'm going to pop up the skills and everything you do want to take. So firstly, for the Sentinel, the original Sentinel passive tree is what you're going to spec into first. So if you don't know how this works, masteries take 20 skill points. Once you reach 20 skill points or level 20, you can then select the mastery over here, which we will end up selecting Paladin. But for the initial Sentinel mastery, what we're going to do first is take 8 out of 8 points in Juggernaut and 8 out of 8 points in Fearless. Fearless is going to give us additional health and health regen, and Juggernaut is going to give us strength and additional resistances. These are both skills that you want to take very early. As you take these, you're going to unlock the Armor Clad skill. It does reduce your overall damage taken from enemies by negative 10% and give you armor. So you're going to take essentially these 20 points right here. These are the 20 you're going to want to focus on. So it doesn't matter what order, take Juggernaut, Fearless, and Armor Clad and max them out. This is where it's going to get kind of interesting. So you're going to select your mastery here and you're going to select it as a Paladin. Now keep in mind, once you pick this mastery, you can't change, but there's a ton of great Paladin builds that you can pivot to with this mastery in mind. So first you want to take 8 out of 8 for Conviction. This is going to give you a bunch of different damage multipliers as well as additional penetration damage. Penetration damage essentially sheds the resistance for those specific attributes. So fire penetration shreds fire resistance on enemies, making you do even more fire damage because the enemies aren't obviously as resistant. Then you want to take 10 out of 10 for Valor. This is going to give you 150 health and 50% increased healing effectiveness. Essentially, this is going to allow you to heal and regain your health a lot more efficiently. This is what makes part of the build mostly invincible. And then 7 out of 7 here for Holy Icon. This is going to be a big one. This increases our healing effectiveness again by 49%, gives us necrotic resistance and health. Holy Icon with Valor ends up giving, as you can see, 100% additional increased healing effectiveness. And why this is so important, and I'm going to show the skills in just a second, but this gives us buffs to our Sigils of Hope skill. Essentially how this build works is you're going to be using a mix of hammer throwing to do massive amounts of damage to enemies, a javelin throw that'll do a lot of physical damage, throwing damage, as well as fire damage to enemies consistently for damage over time. You're also going to use a movement skill and other healing skills. Sigils of Hope is one of those. So this is a skill that gives us a ton of additional healing at really not much cost, which you want to start running very early. Now that being said, after selecting 20 points in Sentinel, -1 for Armor Clad, this should leave you with 5 extra points. And with those 5 extra points, you can choose between a damage skill, so this is going to increase healing granted and damage granted by 70 total percent with 10 points in it. You can put 5 points here or 5 points in Faith Armor. Faith Armor might be the best move right up front because it's going to give you plus 40% critical strike avoidance. Enemies will only have a 60% base chance to crit strike you, which is a big deal, as well as the huge 40% armor increase. This, when you're hitting level 50, is a big deal. So this one you want to max out very, very early. In terms of the passives, that'll get you to level 50, and it's not a bad transition to the endgame build. And I'll make a separate video for the entire endgame build, much higher level. Now this currently is my character a little bit higher level, but I'm going to show you all the skills up until level 50. So I'm going to throw a screenshot up just to the right to give you an idea of what points are allocated where. And then I'm going to go over the skills and which ones you should take when. So as you can see, these are the 4 starter skills, and you're going to specialize in them in this order as you unlock them. So the first is going to be Hammer Throw. As you can see in that screenshot, we have 1 out of 3 points in Winged Hammers. For projectile speed, we also have Steadfast Path, so we get a chance to deal double damage, but the hammers don't actually return. After we take those 2, we then want to go over to Catapult, take 2 out of 2 here, so we get additional hammer projectiles, allowing us to overall do more damage. Then you can check out Iron Spiral, so you get the hammer spiral effect. You're then just going to use the rest of the point for Ballista, so a hammer throws deal more damage. You get overall more hammer damage. That's going to be the starter point of this build. So that's the first skill, is the Hammer Throw. The second skill is Javelin. So the main thing we're trying to do here, as soon as you pick up Javelin, you're not actually going to use your Javelin over your Hammer Throw. until you get to the Holy Trail skill, which heals you and your allies each second and lasts for 6 seconds, but also does a lot of fire damage. So this is a fire and lightning damage trail, and that's where a lot of the damage on this ability is going to come from. So once you get to Holy Trail, you can then start using your Javelin pretty consistently, where you're going to take 1 out of 5 here for Javelin hits have a chance to cause enemies to bleed and have a chance to slow. You're also going to take 5 out of 5 for Javelin deals more damage over time, which is a multiplicative damage with other modifiers. You're also going to make sure you take Javelin hits with a chance to ignite enemies. You can put a couple more points here if you want, if you don't have ignite chance at least 100%. Then you want to take, again, Holy Trail. What I would do first is grab Keen Outlook for dealing more damage, Forceful Hurl over here for 1 out of 5, and then Strategic Patience, so you get plus 50% additional damage. So the first thing I would do after this is grab Path of Judgment. So the Holy Trail increases its additional spell damage based on your increased healing effectiveness. Now this is a big one because in this build we prioritize maximizing our healing effectiveness, making our damage go up a tremendous amount. So take this first and then take 4 out of 4 for Pilgrimage. It boosts our fire damage and lightning damage, as well as our ignite chance on cooldown and our electrify chance on cooldown. And then you want to take 1 out of 5 for Keen Outlook, dealing more damage, Forceful Hurl 1 out of 5 for the additional penetration, and 1 out of 1 for extra damage on your actual Javelin. And then once you level up to it, you can take 4 out of 5 for Mighty Delivery, but overall for the beginning build, but remember for the leveling build, you want to grab 1 out of 5, however many points you need to here, grab Holy Trail, and then go 1 here, and then start speccing out the rest of these skills and finishing them. Now the big thing here is once you unlock Holy Trail for your Javelin and start dealing that big tick fire and lightning damage, that's when you want to swap out your hammer throw skill for Volatile Reversal. Volatile Reversal essentially returns you to a previous position, reverses the changes of your health and mana, giving you both of those back to what they were at a previous time. It also can multiply our damage when used properly, and when combined with the Javelin throw, it's going to allow us to multiply our damage, basically double or triple when casting it on top of an enemy. So this is a big thing you want to swap out for your hammer throw as soon as you unlock Holy Trail for your Javelin. The first thing you want to do is take 1 out of 1 for Incipient Void Rift. It essentially leads a Void Rift when you cast Volatile Reversal, dealing void damage in an area, helping us to multiply our damage. You then want to take 1 out of 1 here for Terminal Void Rift. So when you cast Volatile Reversal, you create a Void Rift where you arrive. Dark Expanse, so Volatile Reversals. Void Rifts deal extra damage in a larger area, gives us much bigger area to do damage in. Then 3 out of 5 here for Harbinger of Dust, making enemies take additional 30% damage. That's a big damage buff. You can then take Time Sap, so we get a chance to recover cooldown on kill and recover cooldown on a boss hit. This is going to allow us to reduce the cooldown by the skill a lot quicker. 1 out of 1 for Time Loss Vitality, so our cooldown recovery speed is plus 60%, again giving us a lot faster cooldown. 2 out of 2 for Traveler's Fatigue, so our cooldown recovery speed is again bumped up by 50%. 3 out of 5 for Disintegration, so you deal more Void Rift damage. As you can see here, plus 66%, that's a pretty big amount. And then Time Rift, so that way enemies damage over time taken plus 60%. So again, you can spread out how you take these skills, but each person's going to have a different path. But these are the main things you want to put them in. If you do that, you're going to be running a very successful build with all of the skills shown here. The next skill you want to specialize in is Holy Aura. Now the main things you want to pay attention to first is you can go for Vital Boon for health regen. You then can take 4 out of 4 for Redemption, increasing our overall healing effectiveness. Again, that's a synergy with this entire build. So I would recommend grabbing this 4 out of 4 as quickly as humanly possible. You then want to grab 1 out of 3 for Rhea's Devotion. It gives you Ignite chance. You can then go over here to Burning Blows to allow Holy Aura to grant you and your allies increased fire damage by up to 40 or 50%, which is a big one. And then Rhea's Fury. So Holy Aura causes you and your allies to penetrate enemy fire resistance. And then grab 5 out of 5 down here once you get enough points. Gives you Elemental Resistance plus 25, which is great. And then 1 out of 4 for Mighty Shield, just giving you a little bit of block effectiveness. And then once you unlock your 4th skill, you're going to slot Sigils of Hope here. This is one of our big skills, and it's going to give us our really big buffs. Now the first thing I would do here is take 2 out of 5 for Invigorate, so that way you get increased healing effectiveness, and that will unlock Quiet Mind. Now this is going to make it so Sigils of Hope cost less mana. Early game for a leveling build, this is extremely important. It gives you plus 50% mana efficiency. This is going to drastically reduce the amount of mana that you need when casting this, because you want this buff up almost constantly. So once you do that, you're then going to want to go 2 out of 5 for Iron Sigils, so that way you get increased endurance threshold. But we want to do that to unlock 4 out of 5 for Enduring Hope, so your sigils last longer. They now last 15 plus 8 seconds with 4 out of 5 points here, meaning they last 23 seconds apiece, which is a lot better for us overall in terms of just quality of play. And then 1 out of once you can summon an additional sigil, meaning you can now, instead of having 3, you can have 4 sigils. This overall is a big win. And then we want to take 5 out of 5 for empowering sigils, so it will increase our damage and damage of our allies. Again, you can put a couple points here, a couple points over here. You don't have to do it in any particular order. And then last wish, you want to take 1 out of 1 here, so you get a chance to summon a sigil when you kill an enemy, which basically can allow us to regenerate our sigils without having to constantly cast a skill. It is a great quality of life skill that you definitely need to have. And then finally, we're going to use Shield Rush. Shield Rush is going to allow us to move across the map very, very quickly. This is the best movement skill, arguably, against Lunge. So for Shield Rush, ideally the first things you want to take are 2 points here for consuming path, so it does more damage. And then you immediately want to take Dark Rush, so your Shield Rush no longer requires a shield and hits additional base void damage. And then as soon as you do this, you want to spec out 4 out of 6 points in Rush Mastery, so that way it costs less mana and you get more mana efficiency, meaning you can cast this skill over and over and over. You're just waiting on the cooldown. Allows us to move much quicker throughout the game. 2 out of 2 for less damage taken while rushing. Some extra points here for dealing more damage or consuming path. Eventually you then want to take 4 out of 4 for a Warrior's Entrance. This is going to deal more final hit damage on the final hit of your Shield Rush. You then want to take Echoes of the Charge, so if your final hit strikes a second time, giving you 2 big hits, and then 4 out of 8 for Splintering Impact, so your Shield Rush's final hit deals more damage. Now for our gear, there's a couple main things you're going to want. You're going to want specifically these stats for your idols. For your idols, you're going to want specifically a couple of different things. You want idols that have increased healing effectiveness on them, chance to ignite, or elemental damage over time, or fire damage, something along those lines. Any one of those is great, but you want to focus on increased healing effectiveness overall, again, as well as fire damage or chance to ignite. Eventually you want to replace them with these, so keep in mind as you're leveling, if you find any clerics adorned Rhea idols that give you big increases to healing effectiveness like this, the secondary stat doesn't matter that much, but these you're going to specifically want to keep, as well as the cleric small Eteran idols that give you plus increased healing effectiveness as well. Now for gear, there's a lot of things specifically you want. So on your helmet, the big things you want are increased health percentage. This is a big one, giving us much higher health overall, allowing us to go through a lot of the content a little bit easier. So increased health percentage, strength and mana and vitality. Those are some of the big ones, because early on we're kind of trying to get as much of that as we can. So for right now, that's really ideally kind of what you want to focus on. Again, the higher the armor level, you can see this is plus 365 armor. The more the armor goes up, the more you want to start replacing those less armored items. It gives you a lot more defense, makes you a lot more tanky. Our chest plate, kind of the same thing. If it's higher armor by a lot, you want to put it on. That's one of the big things to focus on. Again, you can see this chest here. It gives us increased fire damage, ignite duration, anything with ignite, anything with increased armor and increased health. Again, increased armor and increased health are our primary stats we're going to want to look out for. So those are ones you should keep an eye out for. Our belt, essentially the same thing, increased health percentages, bonuses to armor, increased mana regeneration is a good one, so that we don't run out of that stuff that we need. And again, the more potion slots it has, the better. The boots, you want anything that makes you move quickly. The rest of it, for right now, doesn't matter. You can take anything with, again, any of those stats I just mentioned that were priority. Anything with resistances is also good, but anything with quick movement speed is what you want. You want to focus on that so you can actually move around, not like a slug. The relic, you want increased healing effectiveness as your primary thing on here. Again, things like elemental resistance is fine. Any of the damage over time stats or fire stats, and increased elemental damage over time is a good one. Again, bumping up our damage over time on our lightning and fire damage, making it hit that much harder. Ideally for the gloves, vitality, strength, increased health or armor percentage, and other stats like fire damage are also good. For our rings, we want increased fire damage, increased mana regeneration if possible, and again, chance to ignite, increased fire damage. I hope you can see the trend here. Anything increased fire damage, elemental over time, increased fire damage over time, increased damage over time. We want all of those stats if we can get them here. And then for our weapon, ideally you want to go with the staff. Shield Rush doesn't require a shield as long as you've taken that skill. As long as you've taken that skill node, I like using a staff here. It gives us melee damage and spell damage. And you can see the main stats here, minus the chance to blind on hit, but we get a chance to ignite on hit is a big one that we need. Increased fire damage, increased damage over time, and increased elemental damage over time, maximizing the damage we can do. Those are the stats you want to look out for. And then for our amulet, we have increased health regeneration, plus 27% physical resistance, damage over time increase, and elemental damage over time increase. Again, the damage over time is important. If you can get anything else like health, etc., things like that, you'll want that on your amulet as well. And finally, I'm going to go over the blessings very quickly. Since this is also my endgame build, I'll go over these really quickly. Grand Strength of Mind for 10% increased experience from Fall of the Outcast. You can get that one early. Vision of the Aura really doesn't matter. This one, you want to take the armor one for the Black Sun if you get pluses to armor. Chill of Death, so 39% increased 200 staff drop rate for Blood, Frost, and Death. This is a good one you can get very early. Grand Light of the Moon, this is an empowered one for Ending the Storm. You also want Hope of the Beginning for a 12% increased prefix shard drop rate by going through Fall of the Empire. That's a normal monolith. Grand Survival of Might, this is an empowered monolith, so Reign of the Dragons is the monolith you want for this. This one is very important because when paired with our other skill that gives us plus 40% critical strike avoidance that I talked about earlier, that means you get 100% crit strike avoidance, basically meaning a lot of your crit damage is mitigated. So this is one you want to go for first. You also can take Knowledge of Skill for 15% increased skill shard drop rate at the Last Ruin. Then Grand Bulwark of the Tundra, this is the second one you should try and farm for 44% increased armor in the Age of Winter. And then Grand Body of Obsidian for plus 281 armor. Once we multiply that times our percentages, that goes up to like almost probably 1,000 armor additional. So Spirits of Fire, you want to farm that as well. And finally, we're going to go over the rotation, and it's pretty straightforward and simple, which is why this build is so fun to play. So ideally, as you're walking around and starting to walk near enemies, you want to pop your Sigils of Hope. By the time you have it fully upgraded, you should be able to cast 4 sigils to be around you at once. Those are going to buff a bunch of things like your healing effectiveness, your damage, etc. So you always want to have 4 of these up if you possibly can. You can basically start to train enemies. And once you start getting a bunch of enemies together, you can then use your Holy Aura skill. That's going to increase your damage and elemental resistance by a lot and give you really high damage for 4 seconds. So once you get ready to cast your first Javelin back at enemies in a line, you can cast this and you're going to be doing a lot more damage. And once you do that and have both of those buffs activated, you're going to turn around, throw your Holy Javelin, and watch the fire damage just melt everyone around you. You also want to make sure you can throw it at specific angles so you can cut off angles where enemies have to run into the fire, or you can stand on the other side of the fire so enemies basically run into it and just take themselves out. But dealing the fire damage with them, if you hit them with this once and have a high enough chance to ignite, you're going to stack them a bunch of times with fire damage and take almost all of them out with one shot. You can then use Volatile Reversal to ramp up that damage in clusters of enemies. So if you run into a cluster of enemies, cast your Javelin and then use Volatile Reversal, the enemies that get hit by Volatile Reversal are going to be multiplied in terms of the damage that they're taking very high. So you can use this primarily on bosses or high health single targets, allowing you to kill those high health enemies in one big shot from Volatile Reversal and Javelin. And then finally, our Shield Rush. This is what we're going to use to navigate a lot of the monoliths and a lot of the map. You're going to use Lunge early on, but as you unlock Shield Rush, it's going to let you Shield Rush past a bunch of enemies and a bunch of the stuff, so you don't have to run everywhere. That means that it's all you really have to focus on. Make sure you check out either of these Last Epoch videos, and hopefully soon you'll be a master at Last Epoch. Thank you guys. Peace.